Howdy super nerds. So today we're going to start a new topic. Now our new topic is going to look at the different spheres of the Earth, how we interact with those spheres and how they interact with each other, and what sort of effect we do have on them. Not what sort of effect might we have on them, what do we have on them. We're also going to look at a little bit about, or we're going to realize how many different scientists actually have to work together. And it's very rare that a scientist will work in one field just on their own. Like often it'll be one scientist working on a problem with different types of scientists, so a chemist and a biologist and a geologist all working together. All right, so let's get into it. So what's the point? Today, you want to be able to identify the key geospheres. These are the spheres of Earth, geo meaning Earth. So the key geospheres, so there's going to be the lithosphere, the hydrosphere, the atmosphere, and how they interrelate, as well as the biosphere. Now the biosphere is the one we live in, and that's sort of encompasses all three. You also want to be able to produce a hydrological cycle, which is a water cycle, and a nitrogen cycle. And finally you want to be able to understand how the hydrological cycles, so not hydrogen cycles, how the water cycles, hydrological cycles, and the nitrogen cycles link the different spheres together. Okay, so what are the geospheres? First, you've got the atmosphere, the biosphere, the hydrosphere, and the lithosphere. So air, water, earth, and this is where we all live. The only one that's missing from Captain Planet is fire. So, the atmosphere, what is it? Basically, it's the various layers of Earth extending up from the surface of the Earth and right to the edge where we start space. These are the different layers, okay, and you want to have a look at the different temperatures in them. So this here is the temperature. So here we've got altitude in kilometers. This is the side we will look at, and we will look at the temperature in this one here, and we'll ignore that. So you might want to just list down the layers and their heights, I suppose. So you've got the thermosphere, the mesosphere, and you can see that the higher you go, the colder it gets. And it does this, you start from, in each layer, you start from here, and then it decreases in temperature as you go up to about 10 kilometers. And that's where the troposphere ends, which is where we live, into the stratosphere. You can see all the clouds here are in the troposphere. So the clouds in the troposphere. The stratosphere is where the ozone tends to hang out, and the temperature increases there. And then it starts to decrease again in the mesosphere, and this is where meteorites tend to burn up. And then we get the thermosphere, and that's where all the auroras are. And that's the very edge of our atmosphere. So this is what it's made up of, and you should probably either knock this up on a table or another one, or you can reproduce this if you wish. The table's probably easier. So there's about 76.5% nitrogen. That's pretty good. 20.5% oxygen. If it was much higher, the air becomes fairly flammable. Then we've got argon in there. Water vapor makes up almost 2% of the gases in the air. And this one here, we're going to talk a lot about this gas here in this unit, and that's carbon dioxide. It has a massive impact, but it's still only 0.03%. That's really small, but the impact it has is really, really large. All right, so what's the hydrosphere? The hydrosphere is basically all of the liquid water on Earth. So these are your oceans, your lakes, etc. Okay, it also covers about 70% of the surface of the Earth, and it's where many plants and animals live. Like that's the home, fish, sea creatures, etc. Let's just have a quick look at the breakdown of the water on Earth. The thing you want to take away from this, and why water is so important that we look after it. Okay, so all of the water on Earth, right? All of the water here, you've got 3% of that. 3% of all of the water on Earth is fresh water. Okay, cool. So that's water we can use. Sort of. Because a lot of it's ice caps and glaciers. A lot of it's groundwater. Some of that groundwater we can use, but a lot of it we can't. And then we come down to here, surface water, which is actually 0.3% of that 3%. So 0.3% of that 3%. Of which we can use rivers, lakes, some lakes, most of the rivers. We can't really use the swamps for drinking. So of that 0.3% of 3% of the water available to us, even then 11% of this 0.3 of 3% gone. Can't use it. So water is something we need to conserve, we need to look after it, and we need to sustainably use it, and we need to make sure that we do that. That's really, really important. The lithosphere, okay? So this basically is the rocky layer. Now, it's not all the way down to the core. You can see that it tends to cover pretty much just the crust and a little bit below. There's a little bit below the crust, it's still this hard rock, but after this, you get the asthenosphere. Now, the asthenosphere, so the lithosphere goes down about 100 kilometers. The asthenosphere is plastic. What that means is it's not quite a liquid, but it still flows and moves, whereas this is all a rocky layer. The biosphere. And the biosphere is really interesting. It's the combination of all of these spheres, so the water, the land, and the air, and it's where the living things are. So it's the environments where all organisms live. And to be honest, we can even go quite high in the air and still find bacterial organisms that kind of live at stupidly high altitudes. And here's a little, see how they all flow into this one. So they all link up, and that's really important. So the organism, we get gases from the atmosphere, and minerals from the lithosphere, that's really important, and our water from the hydrosphere. And we can see that you don't need to pay too much attention to this. This is just demonstrating that they all interrelate. All right, so let's have a quick look at where these two are. You probably want to get this down. So this is the nitrogen cycle. Now, being a cycle, it doesn't really have a beginning or end, but we'll start up here with the atmospheric nitrogen, okay? So it is brought out. Now, nitrogen is fairly, as it is in the atmosphere, it's fairly inert. It doesn't react. However, it gets broken down in the blue-green algae and then makes its way into the oceans. It can be fixed by bacteria in soil, but fixed means it gets broken down and put into a usable form. So you've got nitrogen fixing bacteria, that's what that says there. Lightning will, because of the heat of the lightning, will break it apart and allow it to react with the soil, and then we get soil nitrates. These get taken up by the roots, and this is how, so these two here, nitrogen fixing bacteria and the soil nitrates, this is how we get the nitrogen in our diet. Now, remember, we're made up of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. Those are the four key elements that make us up, so we need it. So we get it from eating plant and animal proteins, because the plants eat the nitrogen from the animals. Sorry, the animals eat the nitrogen from the plants and so forth. Then we die, or we poop it, and it goes back into the soil. The nitrogen bacteria, again, or nitrifying bacteria, turns it back into soil nitrates. Some of this will go into the water, which will then evaporate up into the atmosphere again, and also volcanoes will spew more into the atmosphere, which kind of makes sense because we also lose some down here to sedimentary rock. The hydrological cycle. This one probably is a bit more interesting in that it's very direct and it's something you can see, but I mean it's no more important than the nitrogen cycle, but you'll see, for us, but you'll see that this one's, you can kind of get a bit more of a hands-on approach to this one. Okay, so we don't need to start anywhere in particular, but we'll start over here at the ocean, as all drains lead to the ocean. So here's the sea. We get evaporation that lifts the water into the atmosphere, which it then condenses to form clouds. So it all comes together to form clouds. And then we get precipitation. Precipitation means to fall out of. So the rain falls out into the soil, and some of it infiltrates, which actually means goes down through the soil, percolates into the groundwater, which will then still always make its way back to the ocean. Eventually, it makes its way back to the ocean. But you also get runoff from running down the sides of high altitudes down to low altitudes, and it goes down, 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 down into rivers and lakes, of which the rivers will always make their way back to the ocean. The lakes will evaporate back into the atmosphere. And here we have this other one here, which is quite interesting. This is transpiration, but you could even call it evapotranspiration. And evapotranspiration is where the trees, as they breathe out water. So as they respire, they breathe out the water as a vapor, and it also then moves back up to the clouds. Those are our cycles. And if we go back here, we can see that it's all interrelated. See, here we go. We've got the ocean. Okay, so the hydrological cycle going up in the atmosphere, and the hydrological cycle enters the atmospheric. The atmosphere, which as it rains down, it then enters the lithosphere and then back into the hydrosphere. So yeah, they're all related. All right, see you in class. You did well. That was a long one. Most of them won't be that long, so hang in there.